Thank you, Dr. Carrier and Dr. Craig, for coming to Northwest. Dr. Carrier, with your hallucination theory, I was wondering if you can back up the hallucination theory by stating in today's science what the DSM-4 says about hallucinations and the criteria as to how we can conclude that Paul and others, based on what the DSM-4 says about grief hallucinations, that they had those hallucinations.
Well, the DSM-4 is actually a diagnostic manual for determining mental illness. I'm not actually proposing that Christians were mentally ill, so I don't think that's relevant here. What's relevant are the definitions of hallucination in cognitive science and in anthropology and sociology, for example, and the studies of religions, for example, the Shaker cults and the Santero cults and the Cargo cults, and various other examples of religious groups, even mass groups, having hallucinations. Of course, they would be convincing themselves that they were having common hallucinations, even when literally they weren't. I'm not exactly sure what you are looking for, though, in terms of definition of...
Well, what I heard you say was based on today's science, we can know that they had hallucinations. And so basically the psychiatric encyclopedia to be able to tell is the DSM-4. The DSM-5 is coming out, but the DSM-4 is...
Well, I mean, you're focused on a diagnostic manual for mental illness, and that's not relevant to here. If you're looking for studies of hallucination in religious contexts, I give several examples citing it in the scholarship in The Empty Tomb, where I have a section where I'm talking about hallucination in my spiritual body chapter. I have sources cited there, a lot of them that are worth reading on this subject. I think I also revisited in Not the Impossible Faith. If you're looking for that, if that's what you're looking for there in terms of that. Where we have, in many cases actually through brain scans as well, confirmed that people can hallucinate through natural means, and that it's actually common. I mean, one example is the hypnagogic and hippopompic hallucinations, which have been studied extensively in science. If you look in science journals and so forth, look for hypnopompic hallucination or hypnagogic hallucination. You'll see many examples of how even normal people can hallucinate. So this is, if you're looking for a kind of definition of what hallucination is, how we understand it's physiologically produced, and the fact that these things aren't real. I mean, if you're being killed by a succubus in a hallucination, I don't think there's anyone in this room that would believe that that's actually happening. And there's a lot of cases where we have religious people seeing things in the sky, meeting people that don't exist, talking to gods and so forth, that span huge numbers of traditions. And so they can't all be true. So in fact, even if any of them are true, the probability that one we're focusing on, like Christianity, that these are the true visions and all the others are hallucinations, the probability of that is low. So you would need very strong evidence confirming that the Christian case was exceptional, and we don't have very strong evidence that the Christian case was exceptional compared to all other religions and other hallucinatory contexts.
Thank you. And just a real quick question. Can you both please define ad hoc? Because I forgot my Webster tonight, so...
It means contrived or artificial.
It means made up out of whole cloth or yeah, not in basis of evidence, I suppose you'd say.
Thank you.
Over here.
Since you're both a theologian and a historian, I'm going to address you as both with this question.
All right.
In all non-theological history regarding Caesar, Washington, whatever, we take documents that which we allow could be fallible, not correct in every area. And we take them, and from them, using our best discernment, we ascertain to the best of our ability what probably or what did happen. So, with regard to the four Gospels, how necessary is it to treat the four Gospels as infallible and inerrant, especially when they do have several, and I'm going to use the word apparent contradictions such as Judas' death. Judas' death is not the point, by the way. I'm not saying it contradicts, I'm just saying,
sure.
Yeah. But it appears to, at the very least. How important is it for us to believe that these four documents are infallible? And to what extent does that belief affect our ability to historically assess them?
It plays no role at all in the argument that I presented tonight. We're treating the Gospels as ordinary historical documents, not as inspired or holy or infallible books. As Richard himself acknowledges, even writings that are filled with errors, lies, contradictions, and so forth can have historical nuggets in them that the historian can mine for valuable knowledge of the past. So, for example, take the apocryphal Gospels, these forged Gospels that came hundreds of years after the death of Jesus. Even though these are filled with fabulous legends and stories, nevertheless, there are historical nuggets in them that can be extracted and can be found when you apply to them the criteria for authenticity. So the thing about the argument that I presented tonight is that it's not based in any way on presupposing that the Gospels are inspired or infallible or anything of that sort, but that we just approach them using the ordinary canons of historical scholarship that we would use for investigating other documents of ancient history. And what emerges from this study is, as I say, remarkably, is that facts like the crucifixion, the burial of Jesus, the discovery of his empty tomb, these post-mortem appearances, and the origin of the disciples' belief in his resurrection can be well established as belonging to the historical core of what we know about this man, Jesus of Nazareth.
All right. Can y'all hear me? All right. Thank you guys again for coming out. I know you've probably been thanked many times. But my question is for Dr. Carrier. In your first argument, you outlined the whole concept of Barabbas. And based on the uncommon name, what you said, it was an uncommon for a man to be named Barabbas during that time. Based on the uncommon name, how can you say he never existed? My mother has a very uncommon name, yet she exists. And so... And you said one means son of the Father as well as the other. As Dr. Craig said, as I study my Bible, I'm very much of a Christian. I try to keep the Bible in its proper context when reading the Word so I can see the point of view that the author originally intended. And so what if one name could probably mean son of just an earthly father? You know, son of the biological father, while Jesus Christ obviously means son of God, the heavenly Father. So just basically, what do you have to say to that?
Well, if it meant son of the biological father, that would still be a fake name. But I want to address your first question, because no one names their kid son of the father in that sense. But the point about the uncommon name, merely being an uncommon name, I completely agree with you. That would not be sufficient evidence for someone's non-existence, not at all. And I would not make that argument, and I didn't make that argument. It's the conjunction of all of the coincidences with the conjunction of the implausibilities of the historical story being told. So when we look at the entire context of the Barabbas narrative, where it exactly matches the Yom Kippur annual ceremony in a story about an annual ceremony that otherwise we have no evidence existing and probably didn't exist because it's not something the Romans would do, and that it exactly matches the story of the gospel where we have the one person being granted the sins of Israel, murder and insurrection, and then one person dying for the sins of Israel, exactly like the goats in the ceremony. And then what you see is this key word, Barabbas, son of the Father, exactly paralleling Jesus as the son of the Father. When you see the conjunction of all of these things, I think it's beyond any doubt that we're looking at symbolic fiction the same way that other myths, the pagan myths, were written in the same way, where they would tell stories like this. We have biographies of Romulus, for example, where we have stories like this that are constructed symbolically. So that it's the conjunction of all the evidence that can come to the conclusion, not the unusual name at all.